Chapter 1147. Usually with these intros to each video I talk about One Piece related stuff outside of the manga for a minute or so, like the anime or live action, even just general news and announcements. But there's not much to really say this week, so I guess that's a sign everything's back to normal in terms of the weekly chapter and episode releases, and that also includes people complaining about both of them, either justifiably so or not. But like I said, that just means everything's back to the way it was, which is great. So now to the new chapter 1147. The cover story this week shows Raizo gifting Yamato with some food for defeating Who's Who. I'm gonna say this is his first time hearing that it was Who's Who was behind all this. Otherwise, you'd think he would have done something by now. Raizo, who is now the new daimyo of Udon, so that clears up that we are still in Udon. You know, as daimyo, he should be grateful to Yamato, or else this would have been his first major blunder very early into his tenure in charge. Tama is also there hugging him. I wonder if Raizo could be of any help to her with her ninja training. So question, could Raizo have defeated Who's Who? Maybe, probably not. So second question, a separate question. Which of these scabbards are left to make an appearance in the cover story? Kawamatsu, Kiku I think, but that's it. Kawamatsu is my favourite of the 9 scabbards, comfortably as well. His relationship with Hiyori I think was criminally overlooked. In Wano, granted it was a small part in the biggest arc in the story, but still I thought that was really nice. I think we'll see him in Ringo. Obviously he has a deep connection with that place alongside Onimaru, where he collected the swords from the Eternal Graves to prepare for the upcoming battle. As for Kiku, I'm not sure where we'll see her. There's 2 regions left and it probably will be Ringo as well, and we may be seeing her visiting her brother Izo's grave and Ashura's as well. So maybe we see the 2 of them at the same time. And the next region after Udon, if we follow the map of Wano, is Hakumai, which is the location where Enma's shrine is located, being the place Kinemon instructed Yamato to deliver Yasui's sword to, so that successful delivery would mark the end of the pilgrimage, because I'd been starting to think that this pilgrimage was the journey around Wano itself, but revisiting the earlier cover pages, it was Kinemon who brought up the pilgrimage in conjunction with Yasui's sword. Plus the cover story is called the Holy Inari Shrine Pilgrimage in some translations, so I should have known. So for everyone who has been waiting for this cover story to pick up the pace, that time may come very soon, because I'm almost certain it's not gonna end right when Yamato reaches the shrine to end the pilgrimage. It's going to pivot to the rest of the journey around the country and something big will happen, like with the Germa cover story, which also twisted near the end to focus more on Vegapunk. The big stuff seems like it will come soon, and I'm sticking to my guns and saying it will be the Blackbeard pirates or a part of them who will have shown up in Wano by the time it does actually end. Like when Yamato's about to reach the flower capital again, the ground starts shaking or becomes shrouded in darkness, something to indicate it obviously is Blackbeard, but not overtly showing him. Opening the chapter, there is a small flashback from just before the fight between Soul and Summers began, where he tells Robin and Chopper about the Holy Knight's immortality, which is why he also tells them to hide to help the children, which has led to the current situation. And he also mentions how he's seen Summers before, so again, it may be a thing where only Vice Admirals and above were present and the Holy Knights were there as well, maybe? I don't know where that would be. The Reverie, maybe? A previous Reverie? So that's confirmation that all of the Holy Knights have that regeneration ability, because I was starting to think, because there is the theory that Gunko is Imu because of the arrows and that stuff, which I don't believe, but seeing her regen and talk about the end of the world, it planted that seed in my head, like what if? But now that we know that this isn't exclusive to her but also for the rest of the knights as well, I can put those suspicions to bed for the time being. But I am really happy that we have been given this mini flashback, because it backs up each point I made last week about why Robin and Chopper were hiding, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Some people really couldn't fathom the idea of those 2 not fighting and hiding for a genuine reason, like them not knowing how to beat Summers and also them helping the kidnapped kids. I didn't mention this last week, but look at Robin's face. Do you think she would willingly let her oldest friend get beaten to a pulp if she was given a choice on the matter, which she wasn't, because Soul actively told them to hide? But let's move on. That's my mini rant over now that we have been explicitly told why they were hiding. Another thing is that Soul knows about the Holy Knights, so I guess amongst the Marines, or maybe above a certain rank in the Marines, like a Vice Admiral, they all know of the existence of this faction. And he also knows about their regeneration, so I wonder if he's had previous experience with them, or maybe he's just learned about it through the Navy World Government grapevine. I could see there being rumors about them spreading amongst the Vice Admirals about them having such an ability. And back to Gunko now, now who is still in complete control of the situation over there. She has all of them trapped, and while trapped, Nami is berating Jinbei about not being able to do much, not being of much help given his strength, and Jinbei basically tells her to shut up so he can think, and I really like that because it shows how comfortable he's become as part of the crew. If he's talking to them like that, this is like when he called out Usopp's cowardice and told him to speak up. When he first joined, he was really respectful to everyone, but now you can tell he's settled in as a member of the Straw Hats. And Brook, he says something very interesting, as if he recognizes Gunko from somewhere else, and we do get an interaction between them later on, but it doesn't address this line. So what if we actually get a flashback to one of Brook's concerts and Gunko is in the crowd, and that's why he recognizes her, and now she sees Brook and realizes who he is. But the idea of getting her to fangirl over him to get us out of this situation is no longer an option, because instead her reaction falls on the complete other end of the spectrum, since she asks him, well, orders him to become her slave as she puts her foot down literally on him. This is the definition of suffering from success, because his music is so well known, so good, that one of the highest ranking figures in the world wants to keep him as a slave. And from her perspective, Gunko probably thinks that her personally requesting something like this is an honor, and that Brook should be overjoyed that he has the chance to become her slave. And I don't care how often it happens in the story, but each time a member of the crew reaffirms their belief in Luffy, in him becoming the king of the pirates, and how their allegiance lies with him as their captain and him alone, it's always such a good moment, whether it's them crying like Nami when she was being confronted by Ulti, or with a quiet confidence like Zoro and Sanji when they were going up against King and Queen, or a loud confidence like when Jinbei left the Big Mom pirates. It's a surefire way to make me happy, and Brook does the same here. No matter who stands in front of them, their belief in Luffy and each other just simply means more. Brook calls her a young lady just like he did to Big Mom, and everyone remembers how badass a moment that was. He stood up to an emperor of the sea and now to a holy knight. He doesn't have any balls, but he has balls, if you know what I mean. Makes me think though, how old is Gunko actually, because she looks to be around the age of the younger Straw Hats, so around 20, but you never know. The thing with Big Mom was that she was 68 and she was old, which is why Brook's line was so good, why it worked on multiple levels. What if him calling Gunko a young lady here is a hint that she is older than Brook, which would make this the opposite of that Big Mom interaction. Gunko said she'll kill him if he turned her down as well, but too bad, because you cannot kill what is already dead, although he is alive. Honestly, how do you kill Brook? Because he obviously takes damage. We've seen him take damage, yet he heals with a carton of milk. He can detach his skull at will, and as a skeleton, obviously the usual means of a person dying do not apply to him, so I guess you just have to break his bones, grind them, snap them. I don't think we'll ever revisit the topic, but I just think it's really intriguing that the body his soul returned to was no longer a body, but it was still a vessel worthy, capable of housing his soul, and I guess that comes down to the rules of that devil fruit. Anyway, he says he would rather die than live without honor as well, which means a lot given what he's went through for 50 years on a ship surrounded by the corpses of his friends, the grief, the guilt and the sorrow that he would have went through. Luffy saved him from that situation, and he's not going to actively throw that away. On the topic of Brook, he obviously name dropped the Holy Knight's last chapter, and my instant reaction to this was that there has to be multiple layers to it. Like, there's more about Brook that we don't know yet, stuff that's just never been addressed because there's never been a reason to. There's been no need for Brook to bring it up, but apparently it could just be a gag where he just knows stuff about the One Piece world because of how old he is, and honestly I am fine with that. Although Summers tells her to let go because that's not what they're there for on the island, but also he does not want to mess with an emperor. That's my captain he's talking about. I repeat, my captain. Summers does not want the smoke, so first of all it's Killinghammer who tells her to stop it and says that they don't want to provoke Luffy, which makes his status feel that much more powerful, more real, you know. Luffy is now someone you actively do not want to piss off, and to be fair, that's always been true, that's how it's always been, but now the whole world knows it, and we see Summers agreeing with that sentiment, saying he does not want to pick a fight with an emperor. Realistically, the reason they are saying this is that, most likely at least, it's just gonna cause them unnecessary trouble and make their mission that much harder than it needs to be. So he's only being practical, but the funnier reason is that they are scared. They're shaking in their little boots. And Summers specifically, who's been constantly constantly talking about death and suffering, the death and suffering of others, suddenly when he could be on the receiving end of those things, he switches up his tune. You can make the argument this feels even better because of the fact Luffy isn't even here and he still hasn't interacted with any of the Holy Knights yet. So by definition, by default, it's his aura doing the work for him. His name carries that much weight. Like CP0 not being allowed to engage without permission was one thing, but a member of the Holy Knight saying it regardless of the actual reason, that means something. All high and mighty as celestial dragons, I guess you're not so untouchable after all if there are even those you do not want to deal with. Next, the broadcast that Killingham was setting up has finally begun, and Summers begins his lengthy speech. He introduces himself as the dagger of the Holy Knights. That's probably going to be different in the official. Maybe it's just a pun on his thorns being sharp. He's riding some sort of serpentine dragon made from one of the thorn vines. Also, we finally get our first look at some of the other villages, one of which is an artisan village in the southeast, where we see a bunch of its residents holding hammers, and these buildings look to be made out of sheets of metal. And I've been saying this since day one of elbaf, even before day one, that I wanted there to be a giant blacksmith. And when we learned of the existence of multiple villages, that evolved into the idea of one of them being a blacksmith village where we can visit, get some upgrades and so on. So I'm saying that blacksmithing falls under that category of artistry. We have giants with hammers, we have metal buildings. I am now holding out hope that we get to go there at some point in the arc. And the other is a hunter village in the northwest, so it's on the complete opposite side of the island to the artisan village. The artisan village I said I definitely want to go to. Realistically, I'd want to visit every single one of these villages. We won't, obviously, because of how much time it would take up, but ideally I'd have an entire extended section of the arc just dedicated to touring the country. By the way, I need to see, after this fight is done, some kind of meeting of chieftains, all the leaders of the country meeting to discuss what the heck to do. That concept of leaders coming together to talk about stuff, what's going on, is so cool to me. In real life, not so much, because in that case I'm dreading for my own life and safety whenever it happens, but in fiction it's great. Like the 5 Kage summit in Naruto, you know, in a way. The big bosses coming together. Back to Summers, he talks about 10 of them have been kidnapped, and Killingham finally wakes all of them up and they are still walking. They each get their own separate panel to quickly showcase each of their personalities. One of them is actually Oimo's grandson, which I wasn't expecting, and the thing about that is that obviously him and Kashi were working on Eni's lobby for a very long time. They were being tricked by the world government, who said that they had imprisoned Dory and Broggy. So Oimo would have literally just met his grandchild. Dory and Broggy themselves wouldn't have any family, would they? I mean, the duel started 100 years ago, so if they did, that would make them the ultimate deadbeats. So I don't think they did. Maybe there's still a chance that they do have wives though, I don't know. And speaking of wives, Killingham has now manifested the kids' nightmares, of course, a couple of which turned out to be their mothers, so by extension that would mean a couple of wives of the giants. And they're the wives of a couple members of the giant warrior pirates, who fear them just as much as their kids do, who are far bigger than them, and they lose their will to fight. That is genuinely insane. You're telling me the giant warrior pirates, the OG giant warrior pirates, who were the ones who were known for their warmongering, fear their wives that much? That is so funny. Even Dory and Broggy are freaking out. Truth be told though, these nightmare wives are far more terrifying than any of the other nightmares we've seen, so I do not blame them. I don't know if this is a way to nerf the giant warrior pirates for the time being, but whether it is or not, this is unironically a great way to go about it. Or maybe this will lead into a fight with Killingham. But first, let's deal with the wives. The thing with that is, my idea is that the strength of these monsters is determined by how the individual whose fear it is views them. So when Gaban cut down those fake Lokis, he talked about how it's a good thing the kids haven't met the real Loki, or else the nightmare monsters would have been much more trouble, which implies that its strength was based on that kid's view and knowledge of Loki. So if that idea is true, unlike Loki, the kids know their mothers and will have probably seen them angry and seen their strength, which could translate over to the nightmares being really strong. So it genuinely would be a difficult fight. And on the subject of the nightmare monsters, we see a lot of new ones in this chapter, a lot of interesting creatures. There's a pumpkin-headed one, a dog-spider hybrid, some kind of sphinx, and so on. And just like the first batch of nightmare monsters we saw, there are a few that can possibly be interpretations of creatures from Norse mythology. There's also some more soldiers, there are some more Draugr, but notice how they have a flame behind their heads giants just like a Lunarian would have. And I missed this detail previously because the first Drago we saw had that flame as well. So again, following the idea that some of these creatures, specifically the ones taken from Norse mythology, did once exist in the One Piece world at some point, is this a potential hint at a connection between the Draugr to the Lunarians and by extension the giants to the Lunarians, because there's already the connection of Nika and Joyboy between the two species, so maybe the two were much more connected back then. Just in general, not that they're that connected in present day, but the bar is pretty low when one of these species is near extinct. And the ship ends up crashing near the branch where Ripley, Bonnie, Frankie and Lilith are able to reach. And at this point Summers is basically commentating because he watches the ship goes down and just starts yapping about it on the transmission. But also, in the absence of the king, he called for Elder Jarl to speak on the country's behalf. There's also a map showing everyone's current locations, so that's going to be very helpful. Ange is being made to announce the names of the kids, and when Collins is mentioned after trying to save the others, Gabon brags about it rather than being worried. And to be honest, he's been everywhere, seen it all, done it all, so even if it is his kid, it makes sense he'd be able to keep a level head. And Summers finally gives the ultimatum: to save the kids they must burn the school and the library and swear fealty to the world government. If not, then the number of kids will be cut short one at a time. So he wants to set the record straight right now. We saw his little tantrum at the end of last chapter where he talked about Harald messing things up. He doesn't just want the giants to take their side, but he wants to make sure that they are the real giants. He doesn't need scholars, so there's no need for any of these buildings, and he's leaving it up to them to destroy them so he can see with his own eyes that they are able to shed that peaceful part of them. He doesn't want to bring back the giants only for them to end up being defective products. And Ange couldn't have just kept her fat mouth shut. She just had to blabber about how the salvaged books from O'Hara are kept in the library. I understand the situation is dire and she is trying to make a plea not to burn it to the ground, but Summers literally just said who they are and that they're a part of the world government, so that is just so stupid. And we end with the two of Robin and Gabon preparing to fight and vowing that they won't let any of that happen. Robin and Gabon was not a fight pairing I was expecting, but I will welcome it with open arms. Any Robin action is to be savoured completely, and we'll finally be able to see Scopper Gabon go all out. So firstly, on Robin, I stand by what I said last week about how it's logically better for her not to fight, given her unique position of being specifically targeted and hunted by the government. But since Saul is now down, and after watching him be so thoroughly beaten, it also makes sense that she would want a piece of the guy that put him in that state. And it's an interesting matchup, thorns versus flowers. That seems like a good fight. So with that, I'm very confident now that everyone currently in the underworld, Hyruddin and his crew, and more specifically Loki, Zoro, Luffy, Sanji, will not have any part to play in this fight, and it will act as a way to boost the strength of the weaker Straw Hats outside of the monster trio. And I would like that a lot. If the situation can be handled without any of the major powerhouses, then that would be a very big deal and a really good moment. As for Gabon, he's finally gonna get his turn at the Holy Knights. I'm not opposed to the idea of him fighting one-on-one against one of them, because he definitely could. Summers will be his target, I'm sure, with him making the announcement and him being the closest member to the kids. This will be our chance to find out if there is any God Valley history between the two of them. So if I were to match everyone up, we need at least one heavy hitter per Holy Knight, so I'd say Gabon plus Robin and Chopper against Summers, Jimbei plus the other Straw Hats against Gunko, and then Dory and Broggy plus their crew, I guess, against Killingham. And I'll actually move Usopp to join this Killingham fight because of those abilities of manifesting nightmares, which is a great matchup for him, and he would also be fighting alongside his masters, self-proclaimed masters, Dory and Broggy, who would be a part of it. If this really does act as a way for the Straw Hats to get stronger without Luffy, Zoro and Sanji, there's no better spot for Usopp to be than in that very fight. So there is plenty of firepower, now that I'm putting it into perspective, for them to win this fight. And if any of the monster trio were to show up, it would be at the end of the conflict, or maybe they could show up near the end and maybe get a couple hits in, but I wouldn't mind if they just missed the entire thing. There's a break next week, but when the manga does return, I don't think we are going to leave this battle for a few chapters. Focus will remain here, and it will be here where we learn about the way to counter the regeneration. So yes, we did get bullied a bit by these guys, however, the tables should be turning pretty soon.